In our headlines on this Tuesday, March 18th, here in Seoul. The Foreign Ministry says South Korea's inclusion in the lowest tier of the U.S. Energy Department's list of sensitive countries comes in light of security concerns and not foreign policy concerns. Meanwhile, South Korean automakers post double-digit growth in auto production, sales at home and shipments overseas in the month of February on year, according to the latest industry report by the Trade Ministry. And a rare phenomenon takes place here in Seoul, with heavy snowfall covering the capital city overnight in the middle of March, as authorities issue what is believed to be the latest ever snow advisory since data collection began in 1999. South Korea's designation as a sensitive country by the U.S. Energy Department reportedly comes in line with security concerns and not diplomacy. Our foreign affairs correspondent Panmunjom starts us off.
Concerns are rising after South Korea, a key U.S. ally, was recently added to the U.S. Energy Department's sensitive and other designated countries list, alongside North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran. While South Korea is in the lowest tier as other designated countries, it is the only U.S. ally with a formal defense treaty. Following communication with the U.S., Seoul's foreign ministry confirmed that South Korea's inclusion is due to security-related issues, rather than foreign policy concerns. The government also clarified that the U.S. has said the designation will not significantly impact joint energy research or technology cooperation. The ministry further highlighted that it's closely cooperating with the U.S., while noting that South Korea has been on the list in the past and was removed through similar diplomatic efforts. According to a report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, in 1996, South Korea was previously on the DOE sensitive country list from January 1993 to June 1996. But the report added that South Korea was a country no longer considered sensitive as of July 28, 1994. But despite the government's explanation, many experts still believe there are other reasons behind the matter. Because the U.S. list cites concerns over national security and nuclear proliferation, some observers in Seoul suggest it has to do with growing discussions on the need for South Korea to acquire its own nuclear weapons capability.
I think that's the biggest reason. The main reason why the U.S. Department of Energy would designate a specific country to its sensitive countries list is nuclear non-proliferation.
Others believe South Korea's domestic political situation may have influenced the move, since the U.S. decision made in January follows President Yoon's martial law declaration on December 3rd.
Once the Constitutional Court's decision on the impeachment is announced, the political turmoil in South Korea will be resolved. In that case, there would be no reason for the Trump administration to keep South Korea on this list.
Meanwhile, the acting U.S. ambassador to Seoul, Joseph Yoon, said on Tuesday that the Energy Department's listing was not a serious matter that could affect bilateral relations, adding that the matter was not a big deal. He explained that Seoul was put on the DOE list due to some mishandling of sensitive information that should not be taken out of laboratories, without further elaboration. Nonetheless, Seoul is looking to actively engage with Washington to resolve the issue before the designation takes effect on April 15th, with Trade Minister Andong set to visit the U.S. later this week to meet with his counterpart. Panmunjom, Arirang News.
On the local political front, the Constitutional Court held its first hearing on the impeachment of Justice Minister Park Sung-jae earlier on this Tuesday. Park was impeached by the Parliament last December, with opposition lawmakers accusing him of partaking in Korea's short-lived martial law by seeking to secure detention venues for key political figures. Park's defense team has dismissed the accusations as groundless. After a 2-hour session today, the bench decided it would begin deliberating on his case without a second hearing. Separately, the Constitutional Court has yet to disclose a date for its verdict to determine the fate of President Choi, whose impeachment trial ended in late February. Acting President Choi has vetoed an opposition-led bill that would make it mandatory for the Korea Communications Commission to have at least 3 commission members appointed in order to operate. The veto took place earlier on this Tuesday and marks Choi's 9th veto since taking on the role of acting president in late December. Currently, only 2 President Yoon Suk-yeol appointed members are active at the commission, while the remaining 3 appointments to be made by the parliament are vacant amid the political standoff. This parliamentary bill was also previously turned down by President Yoon Suk-yeol. Findings for the month of February show Korean automakers noted substantial annual growth in factory output, sales at home and shipments overseas. Our Moon Ji-young covers the latest data.
The South Korean auto industry remained strong in February, showing double-digit growth in production, exports and domestic sales compared to the same month last year. That's according to the latest automotive trends report released by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Tuesday, which showed the country's auto exports surpassed the $6 billion mark for the first time for any February, rising by 17.8% year-on-year. By export volume, the number of car shipments came to 233,000. The export growth in February is attributed to a base effect resulting from an increase in the number of working days, as February 2024 had fewer working days due to the Lunar New Year holiday falling in that month. Despite difficulties in the EV market, eco-friendly car exports experienced a year-on-year increase of 32%. While EV exports dipped by 2%, hybrid car exports surged by a remarkable 61.7%. In terms of domestic production, South Korean car makers produced 17.1% more vehicles, breaking the 350,000 mark for the first time since February 2014. Regarding domestic sales, 14.8% more vehicles were sold compared to the same period last year, totaling 133,000. Notably, EV sales increased by a whopping 298% year-on-year. The Ministry of Industry attributed this increase to a tax credit that has reduced the individual consumption tax on cars by 30% in the first half of the year, as well as the early implementation of EV subsidies announced in mid-January. With the new Trump administration proposing tariffs on automobiles starting next month, Seoul is taking steps to mitigate the impacts of these levies on the South Korean auto industry. The Trade Ministry announced it would form a dedicated task force to closely monitor the situation and gather opinions from domestic auto firms and would soon prepare a more detailed response plan. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
In other news, a snow advisory was issued overnight as capital Seoul saw heavy snowfall, a rare weather phenomenon in mid-March. Our An Sang-jin reports.
South Korea's spring seemed to have taken a hiatus. With unexpected heavy snowfall covering the country starting late Monday, Seoul issued its latest ever heavy snow advisory since 1999 when statistics first started to be compiled. The advisory was lifted around 10 a.m. on Tuesday in most of the capital and surrounding areas. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, heavy snow of more than 10 centimeters was observed overnight across the metropolitan area including Gyeonggi-do Province as well as parts in Gangwon-do and Chungcheong-do provinces up to Tuesday morning. Following the heavy snowfall, Seoul's lowest temperature also dropped to 0, but the feels-like temperature fell to sub-zero numbers. It's not common to see this much snow in March. The KMA noted that a low-pressure system formed by Arctic winds caused much of the heavy snow and strong gales. The unprecedented snow caused travel disruptions and safety concerns, with one subway line stopping services in the early hours of Tuesday, and more than 8 flights and around 90 passenger ships having their departures canceled or delayed. In the early hours of Tuesday, a driver died in a car crash with police pointing to a slippery road from the snow as the cause. Though most of the snowfall is expected to stop by the end of the day, strong winds are expected to continue. The government pledged to monitor and promptly respond to any incidents to prevent further accidents. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The leaders of the U.S. and Russia poised to speak on the phone on Tuesday U.S. time amid hopes for a 30-day truce between Kyiv and the Kremlin to pause 3 years of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Our Lee Sing-jae has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Monday that he plans to have a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday to discuss putting an end to the Ukraine war. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump announced the date of the planned phone call, adding that a lot of work has been done over the past weekend to bring ceasefire discussion into fruition. When asked if he thought Russia would agree to a 30-day ceasefire, Trump voiced optimism. Ahead of the planned phone call, the White House said Monday that a deal to finally put an end to more than 3 years of war is closer than it has ever been. Speaking to reporters, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt said that they're on the 10th yard line of peace, adding that they've never been closer to a peace deal than this moment. She stressed that Trump is determined to get the deal done. Meanwhile, the European Union warned Trump not to trust Russia ahead of his phone call with Putin. EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, said at a press conference following the EU foreign ministers' meetings in Brussels on Monday that the consensus among the member countries is that Russia cannot be fully trusted. Kallas pointed out that Russia did not immediately accept the 30-day ceasefire deal agreed upon by the U.S. and Ukraine, adding that Russia will use the opportunity to make demands. EU foreign ministers at the meeting also discussed providing Ukraine with a new military aid package worth over $43 billion. The EU believes that additional military aid is urgent for Ukraine's security, as Washington is pushing for a quick end-of-war agreement. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in a dramatic escalation of animosity, U.S. President Donald Trump has declared that any strike against the U.S. by Yemen's Houthi rebels will be considered a strike by Iran and that Iran would face dire consequences. Our Park Sung-jae covers his remarks and more.
U.S. President Donald Trump has warned Iran that it will be held responsible for any further attacks or retaliation by Yemen's Houthi rebels, long backed by Tehran. Calling the Houthis sinister mobsters and thugs, Trump posted on social media Monday that every shot fired by the rebels will be seen as being fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran, and that there will be dire consequences. The White House even reinforced Trump's stance, urging that Iran take the warnings seriously. Such threats came after the U.S. launched a new series of airstrikes over the weekend, which, according to the Houthi-run health ministry, targeted more than 30 Yemeni group sites and killed at least 53 people. The U.S. continued its attacks on Monday, targeting the Red Sea port city of Hodeidah and Al-Jaf Governorate, north of the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. While the Pentagon said strikes will continue in the coming days, it added that will persist until the Houthis cease their attacks.
The Houthis could stop this tomorrow if they said, we're going to stop shooting at your people. But they've clearly chosen not to do that.
Amid these warnings from the U.S., Iran's United Nations envoy, through a letter on Monday, told the UN Security Council that Trump and other U.S. officials had made reckless and provocative statements that leveled baseless accusations against Tehran. He also said that the U.S. had threatened the use of force against him, adding that Washington is seeking to unlawfully justify its acts of aggression and war crimes against Yemen. Park Sung-jae, Arirang News.
And in space news, the Blue Ghost spacecraft has become the first private lunar lander to successfully complete its mission. According to its U.S. company, Firefly Aerospace, on Monday, Blue Ghost transmitted some 120 gigabytes of data back to Earth upon landing on March 2nd, well beyond expectations. It also stands as the longest-running commercial lunar mission, operating for 14 days to break a number of records, including that for receiving the furthest GPS signal on the moon, adopting a vacuum to gather and sort lunar dust, and using a drill to gauge soil temperatures. Back on the local front, South Korea is preparing to resume its tour program to the border town of Panmunjom following a 16-month suspension. According to the Unification Ministry on this Tuesday, the related talks are underway with the UN command to ensure safe tours starting next month. The resumption will begin with policy-related visitors before being expanded to the general public. The Panmunjom tour program was suspended in July 2023 after U.S. Army Private Travis King crossed into North Korea during his trip to the Joint Security Area. The program briefly resumed in November 2023, but was halted yet again a week later after the suspension of the September 19th Inter-Korean Military Agreement. The Culture Ministry has selected Andong City as South Korea's City of Culture for East Asian Exchanges for the year 2026. highlighting Andong's UNESCO-listed World Heritage sites such as the Houthi Folk Village. The ministry has pledged to support various cultural interactions. Since 2014, South Korea, China and Japan have selected 4 cities with rich history every year to promote cultural programs, including performances and exhibitions, under a trilateral initiative that aims to advance artistic collaboration. Art restoration plays a crucial part in safeguarding cultural heritage, and efforts between private and public sectors, as well as those across borders, go a long way to better protecting national treasures. Our Yoon-jin has details.
The Leum Museum of Art will be displaying 2 Korean artifacts from the 19th century following their restoration. The 8-panel screen titled Welcoming Banquet of the Governor of Pyongan illustrates the boat ride crossing the Taedong River and the banquet welcoming the newly appointed governor of Pyongan Province in 1826 during the Joseon Dynasty. Since 1927, this artifact has been housed in the Peabody Essex Museum in Massachusetts in the United States. There had been severe wear from leaving its homeland and over the passage of time, and the 8 panels were stored separately, making it difficult to even determine their exact sequence. It took over 16 months for its restoration.
There were parts of the painting missing, from small details to the entire bottom chunks, so we focused on how we could blend those parts without adding new brushstrokes.
Accompanying the folding screen is the hwarot, a traditional wedding robe worn by women during the Joseon era as early as the year 1392. With only about 50 versions of this garment surviving today, the hwarot was once reserved for royalty and aristocrats before becoming common among ordinary brides. It took experts in Dankook University roughly 13 months to restore the hwarot, including research on the fabric and dye of its material and embroidery techniques.
We stuck to a few rules. Don't harm the original form, remove the cause of the damages as much as possible, and contribute to adding to the beauty of the hwarot.
The 2 artifacts that have been restored with Korean technology belong to the Peabody Essex Museum in the United States, which has been buying Korean artifacts since the beginning of diplomatic relations between the 2 countries in the late 1800s. And in 2003, as part of the museum's expansion project, its new wing included a gallery devoted entirely to Korean arts.
We are accepting support from various organizations around the world for our conservation program. We had decided that the support needed for the preservation work of the Peabody Essex pieces would come from such programs.
So far, the Overseas Korean Cultural Heritage Foundation has supported 58 projects across 10 different countries, not only ensuring that the Korean cultural heritage overseas is preserved, but also displaying them to a global audience. But this is the first time that a private art museum has taken part in the restoration efforts as a contribution to society. After the special exhibition at Leum, the Peabody Essex Museum will showcase the 2 restored Korean objects in May. Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. The European Union and its international partners have pledged substantial financial aid to support Syria and its neighboring countries during a critical transition period following the ousting of its former leader. At a conference held in Brussels on Monday, donors committed approximately $6.3 billion in aid for Syria and its neighbors, with the EU pledging nearly $2.7 billion. This year's total pledges are lower than the $8.2 billion raised last year, partly due to reductions in the United States foreign aid budget. Meanwhile, Syria's interim government participated in the conference for the first time, with its foreign minister in attendance. Rwanda announced it officially cut diplomatic ties with Belgium on Monday, citing interference in regional matters. The Rwandan government announced that all Belgian diplomats must depart within 48 hours, raising concerns about escalating bilateral tensions. The decision follows accusations that Belgium has cited against Rwanda with regard to the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Rwanda insists that Belgium has taken sides in the regional conflict and continues to mobilize against Rwanda in various forums, employing what it describes as lies and manipulation to destabilize the region. Finally, in the United States, New York City celebrated its 264th annual St. Patrick's Day parade on Monday local time, attracting approximately 2 million spectators and featuring 150,000 marchers. Participants included school bands, Irish pipe and drum ensembles, and uniformed personnel from the police and fire departments. Mayor Eric Adams and Governor Kathy Hochul were among the attendees and also wore green for the occasion. Meanwhile, in Chicago, the annual tradition of dyeing the Chicago River green with an eco-friendly dye, a practice that began in 1962, was once again observed. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The cold snap is bringing heavy snow and gusty winds. The cold air from the Arctic came down to Korea, making the atmosphere unstable. The daytime temperature in Seoul is expected to be 7 degrees Celsius, and the wind will make it feel even colder. Meanwhile, heavy snow has been falling everywhere from last night. Most of the snow will stop tonight. Up to 20 centimeters or more is expected in the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province and between 10 to 20 centimeters in the northeastern mountainous areas of Gyeongsang-buk-do province, with 1 to 10 centimeters in other areas until tonight. Tomorrow morning will be just as cold as today, with Daejeon at -3 degrees and Chuncheon at -4 degrees. Highs will move up to 9 degrees in Daejeon, Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju. From tomorrow, the sky will become clear. Typical spring weather will make a return on Thursday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon waste concerns in light of Global Recycling Day today.